Hi, I'm Stephen Cockcroft from Catamaran and this is my colleague Terry Singh.
So what we'll discuss today are the top considerations for buying a catamaran.
Yeah, we're just sitting here kicking around what people should consider when they get to the stage where they're going to make the leap and actually buy a catamaran to live aboard or do extensive cruising.
Well, let's face it, it's not an insignificant purchase, so making an educated decision is very important.
Yeah, it's critical to actually spend the time and do the research to get the right boat for you. So one of the most important considerations is your budget. When you buy a boat, obviously everyone tells you that if you're going to buy a boat, budget X, add 20%. The rule of thumb is that all boats cost the same. If you're going to buy a boat that you want charter ready or cruise ready, turnkey, you need to be prepared to spend the money. There are no such thing as a cheap boat. If you buy a boat that is 30% cheaper than the market, chances are it doesn't have solar, it doesn't have radar, a lot of critical equipment that you're looking for. So budget is everything in terms of when you make your decision to purchase.
So interesting, Stephen, we went through the same thing when we bought our current boat. There were certain things that were not on the boat, water maker, solar, washing machine for myself and my wife. And those are things we had to retrofit after. The interesting thing is that's good and bad, and the good of that is I get to choose the equipment that I would like to have on the boat to my specifications, and once it's installed when I'm there, I have an understanding of how those systems work, and later on when I'm cruising, I'm able to troubleshoot.
Right. You know, we bought a brand new boat. This last boat of ours is brand new, and it didn't have a lot of stuff that we wanted. You know, we had to, for example, most production boats don't come with rub rails. I think a rub rail is an important piece of gear. There were pieces of equipment that were not available from the manufacturer, like an installed water maker, because we ordered a 110 boat. Europe is only 220. A dishwasher, which I can now consider critical equipment because my wife is very happy. So, you know, we had a lot of equipment and a lot of additions, and we probably got another laundry list of 10 or 15 things that we're going to do to a brand new boat. So at the end of the day, if you visualize the boat you want to sail away in, understand that if you buy a cheap boat, you're going to have to spend the money to get there, or spend the money and be there and not have to worry about the journey, getting all the equipment. But all boats ultimately do cost the same.
So, do you buy a boat at rock bottom price, or do you buy a boat at fair market value?
Well, you always want to get the best possible deal, because your entry cost will define your exit strategy. So if you overpay for the boat on the front end, your exit strategy is not going to be as good as if you got a smoking hot deal. If you think it's a smoking hot deal, just make sure it's a smoking hot deal. Get your broker to do the research, get your survey, get a rig survey done. And also, nowadays you can go into the internet and you can search, because a lot of boats have blogs and published on Facebook. So you can find out a lot about the boat just by doing research on the internet. But obviously you want to get the best possible deal that you can. But if the deal is too good to be true, then normally it is. So you've got to balance the best possible deal against you know, getting a boat that's so good that potentially there's something wrong, or the journey to get to a cruising boat that you have in your mind's eye that you want to go cruising on is just too great.
I also think that expertise beside you while you're going through the selection process is very important. A lot of boats are out there that look pretty, they look nice on the surface, but I think as professional brokers we can walk up to a boat and within 30 minutes or so determine if the boat is a solid platform to be built up upon and to get these upgrades for long distance cruising. So make sure that you're informed. There are a lot of great resources out there. Catamaran Guru are one of those resources, and we bring a lot of experience to this very, very convoluted buying process. So Stephen, I see a lot of great deals out there right now, so-called great deals, newer boats way below market price. And I suspect some of these boats are hurricane damaged boats. Are these good boats to buy?
Depends on the damage, depends on whether the vessel was submerged or not. Generally, if a vessel has been beaten up in a hurricane and was not submerged, potentially, provided it is repaired by the correct people in the correct yard, you can actually, it's an acceptable deal to do. Remember, when you go to sell it, you have to disclose that that was damaged in a hurricane. It's just how it's done. But hurricane damaged boats, if they were minor damage or superficial damage, I think if they're properly repaired, are absolutely as good as finding a brokerage boat that was not in a hurricane, provided there's a price consideration and a price adjustment, because I don't think you should pay full price for a hurricane damaged boat. So Terry, when you bought your first boat, would you have done a try before you buy if that opportunity was out there? Would you have gone and said, okay, I'm going to buy a Lagoon 450, so I'm going to go to a charter company and I'm going to charter one for a week and live on it? If you had had that opportunity, is that something you would have done?
Absolutely, 100%. When we bought our first boat, however many years ago that was, a monohull, going to a charter company and chartering on a monohull of that vintage and that kind of a boat was an impossibility. I think today in the catamaran business, with the popularity of these boats, with catamarans being in numerous charter fleets across the world, it makes it a very, very valuable tool to exercise. So for example, Dina and myself, before we bought a Lagoon 450, we're going from a monohull to a catamaran. Just that jump alone left me scratching my head. So we chartered a boat in French Polynesia, in Tahiti, spent a week on the boat with 3 other couples, and it did a couple of interesting things. Number one was it validated the reason why we wanted a catamaran. Lots of space, wonderful living arrangements, very social. But it also allowed us to know what being on a catamaran with 3 other couples was like, and that we didn't want to charter a boat at some point, in the future. So it was a very valuable lesson to us. So Stephen, how would you guide and help somebody find the right boat for them, given how they want to use the boat and their level of expertise?
Well, I think that probably the mid-40s is where everybody goes. In a catamaran, that's a big boat, because if you consider a catamaran represents 1.5 times a monohull, you're talking about a 50-plus monohull. What we normally do is we get professional instructors to spend a week on a boat with our new owners. It does 2 things. It gets them to be able to sign off for the insurance company, but it also makes them very comfortable because they've gone out with a professional and they do some extended sailing, preferably a couple of nights, with the instructor, so they totally understand their boat, they totally understand the systems, they know when to drop sails, they learn how to anchor, they learn how to launch and retrieve their dinghy. So I think the biggest issue is that any new boat owner, it's money well spent to get a really good instructor to come and cruise with and live aboard with you for about a week.
So with the advance of technology, and particularly in mass production boats, sailing a boat short-handed has become relatively simple, short-handed being 2 people. With our catamaran, for example, our Lagoon 450 Sport Top, both myself and my wife sail that boat in most conditions. Dina's quite comfortable in driving the boat herself, as all the lanes lead back to the cockpit. We have power winches. We have rules and regulations and guidelines published by Lagoon as to how we should sail the boat. So it's a fairly easy thing to do.
One thing you need to consider, though, is that when everything's working perfectly, it's easy to sail a 50-foot boat with 2 people. But when something fails, for example, if a winch fails, or if a sail blows out and you need to retrieve a sail and you're short-handed, that's when the problems start. So you've got to remember, you've got to think about it. When everything's working perfectly, a 50-foot boat is pretty easy to sail because it's all push-button sailing. But if something goes wrong, there's just 2 of you on board. You have to be cognizant of the fact that you need to be able to handle emergencies. So don't go too big simply and think that every day is going to be a sunny day with no problems. Always consider your emergency action drills that you might have to execute.
So Stephen, those are all very good considerations. From my perspective, I had to figure out how I was going to use a boat. My very first boat was a day sailor on Lake Ontario. The boat we have today is our 3rd boat, which is basically gone coiling around in the Caribbean, living on a very comfortable platform and enjoying a social life. So we have 2 different considerations. Back in 2015, my wife and I, Dina, purchased an ML Super Mariner with a very specific purpose in mind, and it was a circumnavigation. Today we're on a Lagoon 450 catamaran, Again, the consideration is not to sail around the world, but it is to live a very comfortable social lifestyle in the Caribbean.
Well, that's the nice thing about catamarans. It becomes your private island, and it's very comfortable living. You know, there's climbing through the roof to get into your living room is really eccentric. It's much nicer to walk through a sliding door into your lounge. So, you know, obviously we're a catamaran guru, we're catamaran fans.
Well, there you have it, guys. Now you know what to look for in a catamaran. If you're in the market to buy either a used or a new catamaran, give us a call.